All right. I'm not going to wait too long to let people hop in because Matthew Fairburn is at the arena, and I would like to get him home to his wife and young child here. It's been a long preseason already. Matthew, just to tee it up real quickly, Sabres close preseason with a 7-4 loss tonight to the Pittsburgh Penguins to finish the preseason at 3-4. Olofsson, Benson, Peterka, and Middlestat are your goal scorers. Devin Levi stops. I have him at 30 of 37. I think there's a little discrepancy between what we see on NHL.com and Natural Stat Trick. But it was an interesting game tonight, I think. The Sabres, it started, Matthew, with a bag deflator just 20 seconds in. Drew O'Connor beats fellow New Jersey native Connor Clifton back down the ice and scores a quick one there. Sabres did well to bounce back and get it on track, getting it to a 3-1 game. But needless to say, it was pretty much Pittsburgh's show after that Crosby-Krebs fight. And surprisingly, I was listening in the background to Don Granato. You were in the room. I'm assuming you were in the room.
Yes.
He didn't seem too upset. He seemed maybe relieved that the preseason was over and now it's on to decision time on what that final 23-man roster was going to look like. But I'm going to pass the puck over to you, Matthew Fairburn, just to maybe share some thoughts on the game itself and maybe what the next week could look like here for the Sabres. It's going to be interesting to see how this roster shapes up.
Yeah, it was a hectic hockey game. There's no doubt about that. It was, to your point, Don Granato was not overly stressed about this. I think it's hard sometimes to put the preseason into context, no matter what sport you're talking about, right? Like, how much is going to change when you get that regular season intensity? Is it a little bit are some of the things concerning? Sure. But, as Don Granato pointed out, there's going to be a lot of sloppy hockey over the next month or so in the NHL, and the teams that can correct it and fix it the quickest are the ones that eventually set the course to being playoff teams. And the Sabres have stuff to correct. I think you could take it one of two ways as a coach. These last two games that they played with a lot of NHL regulars can be a nice excuse to press a little harder on them early in the week in practice and give them a little bit of a wake-up call to say what it looked like the last couple of nights wasn't quite enough. On the other hand, you'd like to not have to do that, probably, right? You'd like the guys to be a little bit sharper, particularly on defense, still some slow reactions, some standing around and watching, some reaching with sticks instead of taking a couple extra steps and getting the body. All those things that you would hope when the intensity goes up. Like I said, maybe that unlocks part of it for some of these guys, but there were some good things. There were some individuals that played fairly well. And now, man, every time we do this, we're talking about Zach Benson making a case, and here he goes, goal and an assist. And it's almost impossible to see how you keep him off the team at this point.
No, you have to keep him on the team right now. I'll just say it. I mean, you can't really dance around it anymore. We've been kind of waiting for that bag to pop, and it hasn't. If anything, he's actually gotten better. And I thought tonight was just another case. Like, within the first 2 minutes of the game, I didn't take extensive notes tonight like I have in the past in this preseason. But within the first, I think, 3 or 4 minutes, I wrote down Benson just knows where to go. Yeah. And that's the intelligence that we talk about. There were so many plays off the puck that didn't lead to goals that he just makes that are important plays to keep the offense going, that allows him to sustain zone pressure or create opportunities. The problem is for the Sabres, I think, just going back to the game overall and just stepping away from Benson for a second, Sabres were outchanced tonight, 35-20 at 5-on-5, 44-23 overall. They were better in shot attempts, in keeping it somewhat level, but the team defense, I think you kind of hit on it. There's two ways to look at it. It's the last game of the preseason. It's kind of get it out of the way now, right? You'd rather see them lose in the way they did in the preseason than on opening night. But you have to be concerned if you're Don Granato. Maybe he didn't want to come out and say it. You don't want to push the panic button. He has some days here to kind of fix some things, but the defensive zone coverage is concerning. And I just wanted to kind of say that. I think I'm stating the obvious, but no, to your point about Benson, I mean, it doesn't matter who he plays with. And even on the Peterka goal on the power play, Benson was going to the back post, to the Olofsson pass. Jari made a nice play and to disrupt the cross ice feed, the cross crease feed, really stuck his stick out and went right to Peterka. But I mean, the motion, the movement, he's always moving. You can't hold him down. You can't keep him off this roster opening night. It's a matter of who does he play with on opening night.
Well, that's what's interesting is, I had waited a while in the preseason to put out a depth chart projection, not wanting people to overreact to line combos and stuff. So I did it yesterday morning, I think it was. And sure enough, now Don Granato takes Benson off that top line. But my thought was he's been there all along. Let's see how these lines look with him up there. How does that make the picture fit together? And now tonight we got to see how it fits with him on a different line. And I liked it. I wasn't sure what it would look like. And by virtue of moving him up and down the lineup the way that they have, putting him on the power play, doing all these different things, you've isolated all the variables, right? All the things that you could potentially use to explain his success. Oh, well, he's playing with Tage and Skinner. Of course, he got an assist. He's playing against AHLers. Of course, that's nice, but let's see it when. And yeah, now the question is, let's see it when he gets to the regular season, because he's done it regardless of who he's playing with and who he's playing against. Frankly, this was a good Pittsburgh lineup again. So I think the fact that he can move up and down the lineup is actually what is maybe the strongest case for keeping him on the team, because he's just, Seth Appert said it at the start of either development camp or rookie camp, one of the two, that he's easy to play with and he's hard to play against. And that just feels like it sums it up, because I have multiple times written down little forechecks that he made where it was like, man, it's like he's thinking one step ahead of other people on the ice. And that's the player that he's always been. That's the player that scouts described him as before the draft. And so am I saying he'll stick around for all 82? No, I just don't. And he might. I'm not saying that he can't, but at least give him a taste, right? At least see what it looks like. And not only is it hard to look Zach Benson in the eye and tell him, yeah, you got to go back to junior. You didn't earn it. I think it's hard to look around the locker room at a team that's supposed to be competing for the playoffs, that standard, that bar has been set, and tell them that this kid who just played his ass off for a few weeks and had finished with more preseason points than Jack Eichel did when he was 18, and tell him that the kid isn't ready, at least for a little bit of a look. So I don't know. He's made it tough on them, but in some ways I feel like he's made it easy because he's answered every question along the way.
He's made it easy. I don't think there's any question. I mean, Casey Middlestat goal and 2 assists. Greenway gets an assist on the Benson goal. Benson with 1+1 tonight. So that line combines for 6 points tonight and clearly was the standout unit, and that's, I think, kind of another way of what you're saying is, this team can be dangerous if they do go with Tuck, Skinner, Thompson, and those guys start clicking and exploit matchups. But I mean, are we going to, you're going to be looking at a team that's going to be locked into these track meets again if they don't get the defensive zone fixed. And, that's concerning. But no, the Benson thing too, I mean, just to kind of stay on it. First of all, Greenway, better game tonight. And I like, when we were together, the last game that we did this, I made a comment about, I feel Greenway's best attribute is his length. And that was actually the length and that reach that he had allowed him to accept that pass and slide it over to Benson on the goal. Greenway had a better game tonight. So that was good to see. We've been lauding Peterka. I mean, I can't talk about Ryan Johnson tonight. He didn't play. So it's like, I have to find some other guys, but,
great game.
I thought
from
Peterka,
JJ.
Yeah, Paterka just continues to ramp up. I thought he played really well at both ends of the ice. So, I mean, there were some takeaways, that not all was lost tonight. But I mean, overall, though, disappointing defensively, and they didn't make it easy. Devin Levi was busy. Um, it's going to be kind of interesting. I haven't looked at fan reaction tonight other than what I'm seeing here in the comments. And, um, I'm kind of curious because, we talked about UPL's last game, Matthew, where maybe 3 of the 4 can't really hang on him. I wonder what the reaction is from the fans tonight for Levi letting in 7. I mean, I thought that some of them could have been stopped, but we don't have to do a deep dive on that. I just thought it was unfortunate to see him let in 7, and it'll be interesting to see how he bounces back as well, going into what I'm assuming will be his net for the home opener against the Rangers.
Yeah, there were a few goals that definitely he should have had, and I'm sure he would say that. But I think, again, to try to put the preseason in context, it does raise the point of, part of what he's going to be dealing with this year is not just the fact that he hasn't played the amount of games that he's going to play, but the, playing every other night and playing a few times in a week and having games like this one, frankly, that are going to happen, and how he deals with that mentally, because we know he's this high energy, great personality, and just so much fun to be around, and guys love having him in the room. And you don't want him to lose that, because that's part of what makes him so good, is how enthusiastic he is about getting better, and all that energy that he brings to the team. And I had that thought tonight, is that, this is not going to be the only time this defense plays like this as they work through it. And it's not as simple as wanting to play defense and automatically getting better at it. It's easier to coach than offense, but it's not waving a magic wand and you fix all your issues. So you're putting a young goalie in a somewhat unprecedented situation, skipping the AHL right out of college. And he's entering a team that, until they prove otherwise, is a very high event team. It is chances at both ends of the ice, and it's not for the faint of heart at times when you're a goalie. Yeah. It's not the easiest team to play behind. They may get a lot better. They may get things tightened up. I just don't expect it to necessarily happen overnight, and Levi will have to deal with some of this. So yeah, I'm not panicking about Levi at all after, one preseason game, but it makes you wonder when these things happen. And he had some tough games at Northeastern last year and played his way through some slumps, but
especially early in the year. Yeah.
Different at the NHL level, when everybody's watching you, everybody's judging you. You're a little bit out of sight, out of mind in college hockey in terms of how you're being judged at the NHL level. And people are just looking at the box score and seeing if you straightened it out by the end of the year. But here, for a team that's supposed to make the playoffs, if this were a year ago, it might be a little bit different. Pressure's not the same, but it's going to be an interesting season seeing him navigate that. I think he's more than capable. He's more than mature enough to handle it, but it's not easy. It's not easy for anybody his age.
This is where Don Granato, I think, is really going to earn his money this year. I'll always argue that the NHL head coach's job and his staff, it's really to prevent the other team from scoring goals. You're not really coaching the team how to score. And there's a lot of work to do right now. You mentioned expectations. I'm glad you brought that up, because, we saw this team last year not handle the pressure well after the All-Star break, when things started to really matter. And now it's different this year. Expectations are different. How are they going to handle the pressure of those expectations? That's something that I think, maybe you and I will talk about when we meet again, maybe if we can do this before the season starts. I think that's going to be a talking point. But there's work to do, and there's two schools of thought. Like I said, get it out of the way now. Maybe this is great timing to have some of these defensive lapses in the last couple of preseason games. You're not going to be able to talk about, Connor Clifton being, coming in cold like we did against Columbus. We're not going to be we're not going to be able to talk about that. But let's get to some of the questions and comments. Or you got something to say? Yeah.
Well, you don't get the benefit of the doubt when the puck drops on Thursday night anymore.
That's right.
You don't get to use preseason. You don't get to use, and yeah, there's going to be early season sloppiness around the league. But for this team in this conference, as tough as it is, I think getting off to a fast start is huge. And so to your point, it's probably good that it happens right now. Get a few hard practices in, get a lot of tape of what it can't look like. And then, by the time Thursday comes around, it counts. Like, you don't get too much of a pass at that point. And to your point, it counts for Don Granato and the staff when they're figuring out, okay, who goes with who? Who, is Darlene and Clifton going to work? Or, is it, do you need to shuffle things around? All those things will matter. And yes, there's 82 of them. There's 82 games. So you don't, on Thursday night, you don't need to be overreacting either. But if you want to make the playoffs, you got to be able to start stacking some points as quickly as possible, because it's not an easy conference.
Food for thought. You mentioned getting off to a hot start, and we saw the Sabres have some difficulties last year at home. 5 of the first 6 games this year on home ice.
It's a great point.
There's going to be some trends put to the test very early on, and you might find out where exactly the Sabres group is in terms of year-over-year maturity, very early. Because a lot of times we always say, hey, you don't really know where you're at in the season until American Thanksgiving, right? And we're in hockey, so we have to clarify American Thanksgiving.
Right.
We might know ahead of that. Where exactly this team's at. I hate to say it, but most of the comments,
the Rangers, the Islanders, twice. They played 2 games against the Islanders in the first 5, and they play the Lightning in the 3rd game of the season. They've got Calgary, Montreal, so some winnable games in there. But Rangers, Lightning, in 2 games against the Islanders, like you said, you're going to get a little bit of a taste of what they are pretty quick.
2 players. And if you could spend maybe, just real quick, yes or no, good or bad, or 2 players I wanted to ask you about real quick, just maybe tonight or, in preseason as a whole, where you think they're at. One you can only talk about tonight, and I'll start with him. What'd you think of Erik Johnson tonight?
Pretty good. There were a couple of moments where I thought, he's not as fast as he once was, right? Where I forget who it was that outraced
Nieto
outraced him, and I thought, man, especially watching from up top, it was like you could see it happening. It was like with each stride eating up ice on him, and I thought, yikes, like, you're gonna have to put him in the right situations for him to be effective for you. But I do think the overall energy he's brought to practices has been a positive. The impact he's having in the room early on seems like a positive, but that stood out to me as a play where I thought, okay, something to watch. Again, his first preseason action, he's getting up to game speed, but this is also a guy that's 35 years old, and that's going to be a question about him, all year.
On the first goal, where Peterka picked off Jari, it was actually a small play by Johnson that started that, and it was kind of that veteran poise. He calmly skated the puck to the red line, and he was the one that dumped the puck in when Jari had to go back, stop the puck, and kind of led to the goal. But no, overall, I think he was okay defensively. I mean, you saw him make some plays behind the net as well, using his reach to keep the play going, to start it getting out of the zone. I thought he did some good things. To your point, it was one game. In the first look, I just was curious where you thought how he looked. The other one I wanted to ask you about, whether it's tonight or just in context of the entire preseason, Victor Olofsson, especially since he's kind of filling in, it seems, that Jack Quinn's spot. What did you see from Olofsson tonight? Was he noticeable to you? Did you like his game? He scored the goal. That's great. But overall, your feeling on Olofsson?
My feeling on Olofsson hasn't changed dramatically, but I do see him putting in a bit of an effort to be a little bit more competitive, get to the front of the net. That goal is a good example of it. And I see a little bit more of the piss and vinegar that you would like to see from him. A little bit. He's not a dramatically different player. He hasn't changed overnight, but there is a little bit more of an edge to how he's competing for pucks. And I think that line worked pretty well. I think it was, and a big credit to JJ Peterka, who I thought was one of their best players on the ice tonight. But Olofsson, is it ideal that he's still here or that Jack Quinn's not in the lineup? All those things, probably not. But I was overall, considering this was a guy I wasn't even sure was going to be here when training camp started, for him to show up and put the whole offseason behind him, put the end of the last season behind him, and actually apply some of the criticism, I think is a little bit of a positive for him. But my opinion on him overall as a player hasn't dramatically changed, but I thought he was, he used the preseason as he should have and camp as he should have to kind of target some areas that he needed to get better in.
Yeah, I think he is. And I mentioned it last game. He was battling, and I'm glad you pointed that out. He's not going to win all the battles, but he's there in the battle. And I think that's important. I was happy to see him get the goal tonight. I was more happy to see where and how he scored the goal. Right in front of the net. It wasn't the one-timer. It wasn't just him, getting lobbed pucks to just bomb and use his big shot. There was a couple times, one in particular, where he came down. I was like, shoot the damn puck, use your best attribute. And he decided to pass it off. Other than that, though, I wanted to ask you about it just because he's kind of filling that gap in the lineup where Quinn would be. Because Quinn was a guy, you're coming in saying, okay, just finished his rookie campaign. He knows what it's like being in the NHL. He knows what it's going to take to become a 25, 30 goal guy. And now that's kind of put on hold. But
what do you think of the combos that they had because that might be what you're looking at or close to it. Obviously, Okposo will be in, you would expect, if healthy. There's not a great way to make the middle six without Quinn. It just feels like it's missing something. And, it is what it is. But I like it as a whole, the top 12.
I think Greenway having a better game tonight, at least for my eye or expectations, I think kind of helps bring it together a little bit. You and I talked about Tuck being opposite Greenway with Middlestat after the Columbus game. We were talking about having those two big bodies on the edges and, having Casey down the middle. And then we didn't see that tonight. Coming into the game, I was kind of surprised that they put Benson there after seeing it, especially the results tonight. I feel better about it because, to your point, Benson gives you that ability to have balance in the lineup. And maybe if you want to put that top line together, like after the season that they had last year before Tage got hurt, it works. But I expect more juggling to happen in the first couple of games of the season because I don't, it's going to be different. They might have to game plan. They might have to, home versus away, I think might matter with some of the line combinations that they go with also. But I'm okay with, if they go on opening night, how they went tonight, not going to complain. One thing I will say, and it was probably the function of Tuck and Cousins being out on the penalty kill. I don't know if you noticed this, but they did put Thompson, Skinner, Benson back together for the last couple of shifts together at the end of the first period.
Yeah, I think intermission. Things got a little jumbled up because of the PK. And then, so there was a taste of that. And then I believe Tuck was back out there with Middlestat to finish that period. And so things did get, same with the D pairs, got mixed up at times, which I think is good to see because if Don Granato is, going to do what he says he's going to do, he's going to mix those guys up throughout a game. And I think you make a good point about maybe needing to game plan because I think there is a temptation if you're Don Granato to take Tuck and Thompson and put them on different lines So the other team doesn't know necessarily who to put their top pair up against. And that's or who to match up their shutdown lineup against when you have your two top scorers or your two most dangerous offensive threats on different lines. So you can always go back to Tuck Skinner and Thompson as they did tonight. And that's been Don Granato's point throughout, is like he can snap his finger, put those guys together, and he knows what he's got. So now's the time to try stuff. But it'll be interesting to see, because not only these, not, you know, we talk about all these players, how are they going to handle expectations and this and that. That applies to Don Granato too, right? Like, you know, in the situation he was in the last couple of years, you know, where you're developing talent, he's done a great job just bringing out so much ability from some of these guys, so much production. And then when that has to switch to, okay, now the expectation is playoffs and winning, and your decisions are going to impact that on a night-to-night basis, we'll learn a little bit more from his behavior, how he handles it over the first couple of weeks of the season.
So I guess to put a bow on preseason, are you still at 7D, 3 goalies, 13 forwards?
I still like the 23 I put together the other day, which was what we discussed on Wednesday night. The lines might look different, but I feel pretty like we've talked about it. I don't think you can send Zach Benson back. And so there's your 13 forwards. I don't feel a strong need to keep a 14th for the sake of keeping Brandon Byro, as good as he was at times in the preseason. And then it's a matter of, you know, Stillman is clearly that 7th defenseman. And if you really feel like you want to keep 8, that's where you have a tough conversation about goalies. But as much as people might disagree with this, I'm not sure that Eric Comrie massively separated himself from Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen to the point. And you have to go back to last regular season too and look at the whole body of work. And are you completely confident that he is that much better than Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen? I'm not sure that you are at this point. So keeping 3 almost makes sense to give yourself options. But I was saying this to a few people tonight. You don't see around the NHL roster cut times a ton of intrigue usually, but I feel like there's quite a bit with the Sabres team, you know, because Benson forced his way into the mix. You have the 3 goalie question. What do you do with all these defensemen? You know, there are some interesting little subplots to these roster decisions, but I still feel pretty comfortable with my 23.
Not to mention, and we could spend another 20 minutes, I think, talking, because I'm just going to throw the Matthew Savoy name out there also.
That's another whole
and then what
situation.
The hell are you doing? Yeah. So
because he was back on the ice this morning.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's where, you know, he's going to be probably injured to start the season. And then, as we talked about the other night, he could go to Rochester and play on a conditioning stint. But then this isn't the type of injury where he's going to be out a really long time. And so then you have to say, at that point, I think you evaluate, how does Zach Benson look? Does he look ready? And if he does, Matt Savoy might be the one that goes back to junior. If he doesn't, you can send Zach Benson back to junior, make room on the roster for Matt Savoy that way, give him a look, see how he looks. But it's hard after you miss the entire preseason, and Zach Benson has had weeks to build chemistry up and down the lineup. Part of the benefit of them moving them all around is they can put them wherever now in this lineup. You're not putting them, you know, on the 4th line, but you can almost put them anywhere else and be pretty happy with it. So Savoy was going to get probably a similar opportunity and didn't get it because he wasn't
Benson
on the ice.
took the Savoy opportunity. Now, I'm not going to make an argument now at all, but I mean, if you go by the prospects challenge, Savoy was better than Benson.
He was.
And Savoy could come in and look just as good as Zach Benson has. And then if that's the case, I don't care. Keep them both up as long as you want. And then you have the goalie move to make, I think, potentially. I mean, I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but it's also a realistic possibility that Savoy comes in and he's like just as good. And then what?
This is, you say you don't want to put the cart before the horse. However, this is what they're going to be talking about over the weekend, right? As they evaluate and they think, you have to think 2 and 3 steps ahead when you're building the roster. And the Savoy situation is a big part of it. So I think what you said actually popped into my head earlier tonight was maybe they're both on the team for a little while.
So what if they are? I mean, you're already young.
Exactly. I mean, they're not afraid of being young at arguably the most important position, right? In net. Mm-hmm. You're going incredibly young in games played and age and everything else at goalie without any fear. And they've gone young year after year. So, and look around the league at some teams that go, I mean, it's a young league, right? So these are guys that you drafted high, so if they earn it, they earn it. And nobody else, Kulik and Roseanne and Rusek didn't necessarily grab hold of it, their opportunities enough to make you question that. So I think you keep Savoy around long enough to give him a look, see what he's got, and, delay the decision a little bit. And then it's probably easier to deal with the goalie question in a couple weeks than right now.
Yeah.
Because teams will have their rosters somewhat set. Not to say that would prevent anybody from claiming one of them, but teams will kind of have their minds made up on who their guys are, and then maybe you can sneak one of those guys through waivers. Maybe you can make a trade. Who knows? But
that's the big thing. It's the timing of waiving players. I didn't mean to step on you, but it's just like it's so important, though, to mention the timing of when you send certain guys down does matter. That's a great point that you make. If you can delay that decision on a goalie 1 or 2 weeks, the team that you think is kind of in the market for a goalie already gets one, then they're out.
Right. Yeah, just delay it past this initial wave, right? Once teams get into the season. Still, a team might look at an Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and say, yes, absolutely. However, a team might not look at an Eric Comrie, not to say he's a worse goalie, but he's got a $1.8 million hit. And that's the other part of it. With the cap, teams might get their cap just so. And then in a couple weeks, they're like, geez, we might have figured something out for Comrie 2 weeks ago, but now we're a little pressed. Now, on the flip side, maybe some cap space opens up as guys go to long-term injured reserve. So there's pros and cons to it. But yes, to your point, you want to time that properly. And when you have 2 goalies who stand a high chance of being claimed, it's something they have to think about as they're juggling all this. And it's why, certainly it would have been easier, I guess, in some ways if Benson didn't make such a strong case, but here we are.
No shortage of storylines, Matthew. We thought maybe the work was going to be over in terms of the fun decisions after today's game. I think as we just discussed, that's probably not the case. This is going to be carried out of a few weeks into the season anyways. I don't know if you had a chance to cruise through the comments and the questions. A lot of them are of a similar flavor here tonight, talking about the D in various uses of the English language. I see dog crap, stink bomb.
A couple references to Tito and Aspen and their what they like to leave on your lawn. So, yeah.
That's Dan, and that's Dan, Hamburg native, neighborhood native, I believe.
This is a Hamburg-friendly show.
Yeah, they go on the back lawn. They better not go on the front lawn. But no, that's there was just Brian Cummings makes a good point. He kicked off with the first comment asking if there was a way to push the season opener back a couple of weeks. Unfortunately, the answer is no. But his second comment that he logged does reference, it may have been a mistake to not really play the top 6 defensemen in the preseason. 1/3 of them are new, and they didn't look cohesive tonight. It's a good point. I'm not going to call it hindsight, Brian, because I think it was valid thought from the get-go, but that's the route they elected to take. Matthew, I'm not sure how you feel about that comment. I mean, I think we have the benefit of seeing it happen where, yeah, it probably would have been a better concept to maybe get, Clifton maybe involved a little earlier in the preseason, maybe hammer out some of those pairs so there's fewer unknowns come opening night.
Yeah, that was Don Granato basically listening to the players, 2 veteran players that they brought in. Eric Johnson had a little something pop up on Wednesday that they felt, why risk it? This veteran player jumping on a plane and playing a game the same day. Connor Clifton had asked to get more practice time to be able to push harder in practice and not burn himself out with the preseason games because he thought that would be better for acclimating to the system. So, Granato deferred to the players on that one, and we'll see on Thursday night. I think that's something worth revisiting after we see it in regular season action, because this might be a case of Connor Clifton getting a couple games in and being like, okay, this isn't work, and being able to look at stuff, apply it in practice. So but I think that's a valid, pin to put in this game and say, okay, let's see in a week or 2 weeks if they're still not figuring out, because I think the pairs part is probably an important piece to this too, is if you banked on Dahlin and Clifton and then you didn't see it in a game until the last couple of nights, and you have to switch that up and try to build chemistry with something else. But who knows? They might keep it. So I guess we'll see how they handle that. But yeah, it's the defense as a whole is definitely the number one thing I think everybody will be watching heading into the season, especially when you have a game like this one. And Don Granato pointed out, and I think it's fair, that Pittsburgh had their regular season. These weren't the words he used, but they had their regular season pants on, right? They were a little bit more locked in, and that's a veteran group. They know what they need to do to get ready for the season. They got that intensity going. They had that regular season mindset. The Sabres didn't really get there. They got there for stretches of the game, but they didn't get there for long enough, and that's going to hurt you in your own end a lot.
Oh, big time. Pittsburgh's best players were tonight better than the Sabres' best players. I think that showed. And no, that's a good way to kind of end it. I only have one more question for you, Matthew. How many cookies did you have tonight?
You know me too well. I did grab one on the way down. Well, my wife made cookies this week too, so I had one before I left, which I knew was a mistake, knowing that I would, be here where I would get a free one. So
I didn't see a tin on my stoop.
That's a good point. You'll have to raise that with her.
I have her number.
Yeah,
I might let her know.
I don't know if it's a delivery service. It might be drive-through only. You'll have to venture out to the frontier district of Hamburg to get the goods. But yeah, that's the dangerous part of hockey season, is the press box suites can catch up. So today, to combat it, I got a gym membership. I haven't had a gym membership in a while because I work out at home, but had to get into that mindset, right? We talk about mindset shift. Had to lock it in. So, the cookies were had, but we're ready to get after it tomorrow.
I had a nice dinner at Mulberry last night, and I have to say it is definitely elliptical season here. So I'm feeling you.
It's been a while since I've gotten an elliptical video.
Yeah. Well, they're coming. I mean, I was eating chicken parm and pasta broccoli leftovers today, and yeah,
the temperature dropped though, so it's okay to add a little bit here and add a little cushion for the cold weather.
I got enough cushion, man. Matthew, get out of there. Have a safe drive home, and we'll catch up here early next week and discuss our battle plan for the season.
We'll get our regular season pants on here in a few days.
Yeah, they've been on. They're on. Trust me, they're on. I'm about to go watch Scott Ratzlaff in net for Seattle against Spokane. So the fun never ends here in the bunker. But everyone, thanks for watching, and thanks for the questions and comments as always. Thanks, Dan Meyer, for it being a Hamburg-friendly pod. and we'll catch up with everyone very soon.